everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam, and today I'm going to be sharing some book recommendations, and more specifically I'm going to be talking about some of my favourite romance books. I guess you could say the books on this list fall into two categories. So I read two different types of romance books. I read romance books that are more traditional and that are super steamy, but then I also read contemporary romance. So hopefully, depending on what kind of mood you're in, you'll find something that you like the sound of, but I will also leave timestamps in the description so that you can flick ahead if there is a particular book that you're interested in. The first book that I want to mention is a book that I read a couple of months ago, and I'd probably say it's the steamiest book that I've read so far this year, and that is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. The quickest way to describe this book is that it's a retelling of the film Pretty Woman. The main character is a woman called Stella who has Asperger's, and she has convinced herself that she is terrible at intimacy and relationships, and she gets this idea to hire a male escort called Michael to teach her the things that she thinks that she's bad at. This is an own voices novel because, as I mentioned, the main character Stella has Asperger's, and so does the author. If you are looking for a book that gets going quite quickly, then I would definitely recommend this, because I was for some reason expecting a little bit more of a build-up, but it does pretty much throw you straight in at the deep end pretty much from the second or third chapter. Even though it does have quite a lot of steamy bits, there are also some moments that are really cute and adorable, and I really liked the relationship between the two main characters. I'm pretty sure that I finished this within a day because I just couldn't put it down. It was really engaging and it moved really quickly, and I'm also pretty certain that I got it free on Kindle Unlimited. There's also another book in the series which I think came out this year, and it's a companion novel, so you can read them as individual novels but they feature similar characters. I also think I've seen that there's another book that's coming out next year. I think it was meant to come out this year but it was delayed, and so now it's been pushed back to 2021, but I definitely want to read that too at some point because I really enjoyed Helen Hoang's writing. The next two books on my list I'm going to talk about together because I read them quite recently, and they are Get a Life Chloe Brown and Take a Hint Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. These are part of the same series, but they're standalone novels, so they feature similar characters, but you can read them individually. You don't have to read them in order. So Get a Life Chloe Brown is about a woman who has a chronic illness, and at the very start of the book she is almost hit by a car, and it makes her start to reevaluate her life, and it causes her to make this list of things that she would like to do to help her get a life, because she feels like life has kind of been passing her by. One of the first things that she does is move into her own apartment, where she meets the superintendent of the building, who's called Red, and she asks him for his help in ticking off some of the things that are on her list. Take a Hint Dani Brown then follows Dani Brown, Chloe's younger sister, who is a PhD student at this university, and one day she gets stuck in a lift and she's rescued by her friend Zaf, who is a security guard in the same building, and they end up going viral on Twitter, and Zaf asks Dani to pretend to be his girlfriend just for a little while so that they can take advantage of the publicity to promote Zaf's charity. What I really like about both of these books is that Talia Hibbert does such a great job of writing characters that you really want them to end up together, you really root for them, and that's what you want in a romance book. You want characters that you're rooting for. If you like books that are diverse but that are also super steamy, then I really recommend both of these books. There's also another book in the series that's coming out next year that follows Eve, the youngest of the sisters, and I've heard a few early reviews that say that this could be the best one in the series, so yeah, really excited to read that next year. The next book on my list is Red, White and Royal Blue by McQuiston, and this follows our main character Alex, whose mom is the first female president of the United States, and Alex has had this feud for a while with Prince Henry, who is the Prince of Wales, and this is described as an enemies to lovers, but it's more like an enemies to friends to lovers, and even then the enemies part doesn't really last that long. I don't really know why they've had this feud, but basically at the very start of the book they cause this scene at a royal wedding, and their PR team say, right, that's enough, you guys need to be friends, and they're basically forced to spend time together and have this fake friendship, and their relationship kind of develops from there. This also has quite a few steamy bits, but I loved Alex and Henry. I thought they were so adorable, and do you ever read a book that just puts a huge smile on your face? Because I feel like that's what this was for me. There were parts that were so funny and I genuinely laughed, and I think I finished this within a a day because it was so engaging and the writing was so easy and I just couldn't put it down. The only thing I will say is that I think this book is aimed more at an American audience, only because the royal family in this is very stereotypical, and I've seen a few people that really didn't like that. It didn't bother me personally, and I think that if you bear that in mind going into it, then I would really recommend this. The next book I'm going to mention is Beach Read by Emily Henry, and this is about two writers called Augustus and January. Gus writes literary fiction, whereas January writes best-selling romance books, and so they're pretty much polar opposites in their writing styles. However, what they do have in common is that they're both struggling with writer's block, and they end up living in neighbouring beach houses over the summer, and they get talking and they decide to swap genres to help them get through writer's block. So Gus decides that he's going to write a romance book, whereas January is going to write something that's like dark and gritty. What I liked the most about this book was the chemistry between the two characters. I thought that they had really good banter and it was just really fun to read. In general, it was quite light-hearted, but it also had a little bit of depth. For example, at the very start of the book, we learn that January's dad has just passed away, and that's why she's living in this beach house, because it was his, and she's gone there to clear out some of his stuff. This isn't what I would call a steamy romance book. However, there was one scene partway through the book that I personally felt was a little bit out of place in comparison to the general tone of the rest of the book. If you've read it, then let me know what you thought, because I'm not sure whether it was just me, but it seemed to come out of nowhere, and I'm not complaining, but yeah, just something to bear in mind. Next, I'm going to move on to some contemporary romances. So these are books that I would say are contemporary fiction, but that still have romance as the main plot, and that romance is still central to the book. And the first book I'm going to mention is One to Watch by Kate Stayman-London, which is about a plus-size blogger who is a huge fan of this TV show that sounds very similar to The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. One evening, she settles down to watch the new series of this show, and she writes a post online talking about the lack of diversity on this show, and it ends up going viral, and it causes the producers to kind of reassess, and they invite Bea to become the star of the next season. And at first she's not really sure whether to accept, but she recognises that this is a really big opportunity for her to further her career, and that's the only reason she's doing it. She's not going to fall in love, but once the show gets started and the further that she gets into the series, she starts to accept that she might actually have an opportunity to find real love on this show. I don't think I've ever actually watched The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. However, I do watch a lot of reality TV, and I think that if you like reality TV, then you'll love this book, because it is basically like watching a reality TV show but reading it instead. Throughout the book you also get tweets and emails and texts from people that are watching the show, and I thought that was really interesting to get that outside perspective. It helped make it feel more real. Some of the comments made about Bea are very positive, but some of them are very fat phobic, and that's just something to bear in mind as a content warning if you are planning to read this book. This is one of those books where you might think it's going to be fluffy or predictable, but it really wasn't. There were times where I genuinely had no idea what direction the book was going to go in, and there was one scene in particular towards the end where I genuinely felt like I was going to cry. But I did feel like this book was so unique, and I would really recommend it if you like contemporary romance. The next book that I'm going to mention is The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary, and this was actually one of my favourite books that I read last year, and the summary of this book sounds a little bit ridiculous because it's about two people that share a flat, and they even share a bed, but they've never met. Basically, the flat belongs to this guy called Leon, and he shares it with a woman called Tiffy. So Leon works nights, so he has the flat during the day while Tiffy's at work, and then Tiffy has the flat for the rest of the time. And so yeah, it sounds kind of ridiculous, and I saw loads of people talking about this book, and I read the synopsis and thought, why do people like this? It sounds so stupid. And it is very cheesy, and it is a little bit predictable, but also it's really heartwarming, and I loved it. The perspective switches back and forth between Tiffy and Leon, and I liked that the way that the chapters were written were very distinctive, and so you knew who you were reading about at any particular time. The characters just in general were really likeable, and there were so many moments where I genuinely laughed. Beth O'Leary does a really good job of balancing the cute and fluffy with serious topics. So this book does deal with gaslighting and emotional abuse, and I think the author did a really good job of highlighting that. Even though, like I think I said, it was a little bit predictable. I feel like with romance books, I don't actually care if I can guess where the book is going, because the journey to get there is just so fun. And I did really enjoy this book overall, and I would recommend it. Okay, so I think that brings me to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, leave me a comment down below if you've read any of the books on my list, and let me know if you have any recommendations for romance books that you think I'd like based on the books that I've mentioned. If you did enjoy this video, then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.